Good evening, everyone. It is Tuesday, December 12th, 2023, and we are here with the Athens-Clarke County Mayor and Commission in City Hall for several purposes tonight. We will be having a special called session at the front end of the evening with two action items. We will have, as part of that special called session, an executive session that will happen at the end of the evening when all of the business is final. And then we, of course, will also have our regularly scheduled agenda setting session after the two items of old and new business on our special called session. There will be opportunities for public input on the two items on the special called session, and then later in the agenda setting session on the consent agenda and on old and new business. Rules of public input are essentially the same for all items. There's a 3-minute opportunity for any member of the public in each of the meetings who would like to speak. For any member who would like to speak, just be conscious that there are many people in the room who want to speak, and I want them to be respectful of you just as you will be respectful of them by listening silently through that time. The first order of business is always a roll call, and so I'm going to ask Clerk Spratland to call roll.
Davenport. Blake.
Here.
Taylor.
Here.
Wright.
Present.
Fisher.
Here.
Thor.
Here.
Culpepper.
Here.
Myron.
Here.
Thornton.
Here.
Here. All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. I appreciate it. And again, we're going to consider two items of old and new business this evening. But first, Attorney Drake wanted to clarify a question that emerged in our last meeting for the benefit of us and the public.
Yeah, I want to clarify and apologize to the Mayor and Commission, and particularly Commissioner Wright. She asked me during the meeting, or at the beginning of the last meeting, about the sale of alcoholic beverages on the one Sunday out of the year, and whether that wasn't it correct that it was limited till 12 o'clock midnight, which I looked at the state law very hurriedly, and I said that is correct. But what I've learned, and I should have known better, was to make sure, to be very careful, and I wasn't as careful as I need to be that night. That is generally the rule, that a local government can only authorize the sale of alcoholic beverages on one Sunday out of the year, and we survey our local businesses here, our local bars, to decide which Sunday that'll be. And so this year that's New Year's Eve, and next year that'll be St. Patrick's Day. While the state law provides that, the state law also provides that local governments on any other day other than Sunday can regulate the hours that we offer alcohol for sale. And so previous Mayor and Commission has adopted an ordinance which says that on that one Sunday of the year, alcohol can be sold for Class D, E, and F license holders from 12 a.m. midnight on Monday until 2:30 a.m. on the following, from 12 a.m. midnight to 2:30 a.m. the following Monday. So currently in Athens-Clarke County by ordinance, we have it till 2:30, which is a little longer than our normal period, which is 2. But I apologize for that. I've worked with Jeff to send out a notice to everyone, and he'll be sending that out to make sure. I think the bars pretty well know, though, because they immediately were calling me out my office about it. So I apologize for that, not giving good advice on that the other night.
These days I'm for 24/7.
What's that?
These days I'm for 24/7.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah.
We're always looking at ordinance revisions. Commissioner Wright, you had a question?
Yeah, I wanted to say it was also part of my distraction during the meeting because it was in the agenda item, but once it was separated, it said until midnight, and then like the next line brought up the
Didn't look at it properly.
But anyway,
I take
so
responsibility.
my whole point was to make sure everybody knew, and I think everybody's going to know more than ever about it now. And the alert that went out yesterday was very thorough and is easy to share with people who are on Notify Me. So I appreciate the attention that it's gotten for the business owners. and
Athens-Clarke County,
patrons.
making sure nobody goes thirsty. We do now have public input on the two items of old and new business that are on the agenda. So again, there's a 3-minute opportunity. The light in Clerk Spratland, in front of Clerk Spratland, will turn green when you begin speaking, yellow when you have 30 seconds remaining, and red when your 3 minutes has concluded. So would anyone like to speak to either of those two items on our special called session?
Amazing.
And just introduce yourself with your name and place of residence and the item to which you're speaking.
Connie Staudinger. I'm the CEO of the Athens Housing Authority at 300 South Rocksprings Street in Athens, Georgia. And I would like to speak on the first item, Athens Flats. So good evening, Mayor, Commission. Happy holidays. And on behalf of the Athens Housing Authority Board, we wish to thank you for your support of this project. The Housing Authority's participation in this project was subject to the approval of the pilot by you. We know that for everything that you say yes to, you have to say no to something else, and we appreciate your recognizing this project as a priority. Athens Flats will be a new construction development located on 14.2 acre site on Hull Road. Will consist of 192 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units, with 100% of the units being offered as affordable housing for households earning up to 60% of the area median income, subject to, of course, strict leasing and income restrictions of the tax-exempt bond and tax credit programs. These restrictions will be filed against the deed and run with the property, but they do sunset. What makes this project significant is that the Athens Housing Authority is part of the owner entity and the ground lessor. The land will be conveyed at closing to the Housing Authority, and the Housing Authority will immediately lease the land back to the owner. It will be a 99-year ground lease. The Housing Authority will also hold a right of first refusal and option to purchase, meaning that in 18 years, the authority will be able to acquire these 192 units, and as a result, the affordability of the units will be guaranteed long-term. That's pretty amazing. Athens Housing Authority aspires to be an organization centered on what matters the most. The Affordable Housing Investment Strategy adopted by you this fall identified a tremendous need for affordable housing, I believe more than 8,000 units. The strategy acknowledges that ACC has historically relied on partnerships with developers and organizations from outside of the community to accomplish a significant portion of affordable rental housing development. The strategy recommends a focus on partnerships that build the capacity of local organizations. This is exactly what this does. So, all right, put me in, Coach. With this commitment, you're successfully leveraging your committed network of local partners, namely your housing authority. Finally, I hope you join me in recognizing the work of your staff, Manager Blaine Williams, Assistant Manager Nikki Jones, County Attorney Judd Drake, and others. Making this work in the time frame allotted or allocated has been monumental, and they should be commended for advancing the recommendations of your affordable housing investment strategy. I would like to also thank my partners from Virgin Held Asset Management, Corey Stark and Sam Rogers, and from Tapestry Group, John Toppin. We're here to answer any questions, but otherwise, let's get this one done. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Staudinger. Would anyone else like to speak to any item of old or new business on the special called session? All right, we will come to discussion. Of course, as everybody has received correspondence, we have, as Ms. Staudinger indicated, a unique opportunity to create not only additional affordable housing, but affordable housing that ultimately will be in the public trust and available very long-term. So I'd entertain a motion regarding this item.
I so moved.
I'll second.
All right, motion for approval from Commissioner Thornton, second from Commissioner Link. Is there an ordinance related to this, Attorney Drake?
No, Your Honor, it's just an agenda item.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Some comments, Commissioner Thornton?
No, I think this is the right direction to be going. I'm so excited. We did some housing stuff at the last meeting, and to have this in my district again is even more amazing. I do have a question, though. Because this is a partnership, does the public partners follow HUD guidelines? And my question really goes with, I love the 60% below AMI. That's just huge. That answers, I see Ms. Daniels has walked in. That is one of her big concerns, making them affordable for another level of people. So my question is, does this private partner follow HUD guidelines as rents increase? I mean, as incomes increase, does the rent increase or does it stay south?
No, actually, this is a 100% low-income housing tax credit and tax-exempt bond property. So there will be a rent that the household has to pay, but those rents are set by the by HUD and by the government, and
Okay.
so it is a reduced rent that is regulatory, and they would pay that rent. I will say that we anticipate about 38 voucher units going into the property, and those voucher units would be subject to HUD regulations and the 30% of the family's income in the case of those voucher units.
Well, I'm very excited. I'm very excited. This is what we've been talking about, and by golly, you're doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, this is exciting, and I appreciate y'all pulling this together. This is 192 units, which I guess translates into several hundred bedrooms. Do you have a number on the bedrooms?
It's 300 and...
306.
305.
305 bedrooms,
305.
okay. Yeah, that's exciting. That'll start to put a dent in our affordable housing stock, and this is in a location that's adjacent to shopping, grocery, near jobs. The kind of location where, folks can actually get to where they need to go and not be stranded out in the middle of nowhere. So I'm really eager to support this project.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fisher?
Yes, hey, Connie. Again, thank you all for doing this and putting this together. I'm sorry I missed last Tuesday. What would be the average, what you think would be the average rent though for, I guess it'd be based on the number of bedrooms, but on the average, what would rent probably run, you think?
I'm going to ask Corey to help me with that question. He's got it.
So this is Corey Stark with Virgin Health. The average rent will be about $1,000 on the unit on the blended for across those 1 and 2, 3-bedroom units.
Thank you. Commissioner Myers?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. This is a no-brainer, and this is exactly one of the strategies that our Affordable Housing Investments Strategy Plan included in there, where with the LICA projects, the local government is providing the gap financing. So is it just for me and, well, anyone else as well, the gap financing is included in here as not only the payment in lieu of taxes, but also the amount of money for the utility hookups being there. Are those two things adding up to be the gap financing that we're providing?
Sure. There's actually no gap financing per se, but these two things help offset the cost. So the way that we're able to keep the rents where they're at is a couple of ways. And so equity is free money, right? So you need free money in these deals to be able to pay down the amount of debt that you have to borrow. So by reducing the debt, you're able to offer the rents that you're offering. So you paid down the cost, if you will, up front with the sewer and tap waiver, and then you also helped on the long run because by us having less tax expense, then we were able to borrow more money. And we were finding ourselves with a need to borrow more money because of construction costs. We have locked our rate. That rate lock expires on the 22nd, so we hope to close on the 21st. But at least we get rid of that interest rate risk. But the construction risk has been, as you know, on all deals. So with the abatement of some of the taxes, it's going to help with our ability to borrow more money.
Following up on that, there was something in the previous document that we got from Manager Williams before 2 meetings ago or whatever, that I think referred to, or maybe it was something I read in the paper as well, the kind of, what was the word, the developer deferred the units, an overall subsidy that we're providing then per unit. Do we have a number on that now with the new numbers?
It is. It's about $13,000. It's about $13,000 a unit. So what you all did was your staff creatively provided an alternative to the lack of gap financing that we have in Athens. So they used other tools basically to offset the lack of gap financing by doing what they did. And it was very much appreciated. But it is about a $12,000, $13,000 per unit subsidy.
And then you all have the right of first refusal
That's
when the low-income period gets over. Is that something you're guaranteed or to follow through up on?
Yeah, the way that the IRS really wants the housing authority or a nonprofit to have that right of first refusal, These extended use agreements are usually for 30 years, but at the end of 15 years, our initial investor, who is R4, is going to want to exit the deal. And what we would do is, when they exit the deal, we would go back to DCA, to the State Housing Finance Agency, get another allocation of credits to be able to purchase our GP partner's interest in the deal, so that we are sitting in the sole seat of the general partner part of the limited partnership agreement. So, and then another investor would come in and take the LP seat of that agreement. So there's right of first refusal and a purchase option that would be executed at the end of the initial compliance period.
Thank you so much. That helps.
Yes.
Commissioner Hoult.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple questions. I do want to begin by thanking our staff and your staff at the Housing Authority and you, Connie, for trying something new and exciting here. We need more of this, so I hope we're off to a good start here. The first question I had a good conversation with Manager Williams earlier today, and I just want to confirm that I got some figures right here. So when we're looking at because when I read the agenda report, it talks about 306 beds, and then it talks about a calculus of 245. And so my understanding is that we are subtracting 61 beds from that 306 figure, because those are beds that would be fully subsidized and therefore aren't part of the pilot. But the remaining 245 are what we're using for the pilot. Is that correct?
Those are the LIHTC units, and the ones that are fully subsidized are the voucher units. So that was the way that splits. It's the voucher units versus the balance of the community.
Okay. And am I correctly understanding that that's 19 one-bedroom, 15 two-bedroom, and 4 three-bedroom units?
Yes.
Yes.
Executive Director Staudinger helped us to model that when we were creating that, and that's directly from the sheet she provided.
Okay. And then the last one's a little bit of attempted math nerding that I did with Manager Williams, but just to understand, I see that this calculus here, I'm looking at Facts and Issues 24 for anyone who's trying to follow along. You look at kind of these old amounts, and let's imagine in 2 years we have another development like this. Would we be citing a flat figure of 372 per unit as an example for the Athens Flats? Or would we adjust that figure by 3% per year? So let's say if, for example, it was 2 years from now, we'd be looking at 395 rather than 372. Could you just...
The answer is yes, and I'll just kind of re-explain it. The question Commissioner Houle is posing is a good one, and that is, in a future deal, would we be using today's dollars calculation, or would we escalate whatever today is to that future date? So let's say 10 years from now we get the next one. Then we would, to be fair across the board, we would escalate, we would bring it to present day in the future, if that makes sense. So, so that everything's the same. We're trying to.
Excellent. And then I guess my last question, thank you for this, but I noticed that it wasn't in the agenda item, so I'm used to seeing things on like a map, I read this, I really honestly have no idea what it means, but is staff concurring with this description as the property is making sense? And is this part of what we're including in our approval today?
The email that I saw Wayne got, where you got a copy of this, says they're working on plat, so we can look at the plat and make sure it's the same, too.
Okay. So would we need to adjust our motion at all to allow for revisiting this if
Well,
necessary?
the agenda says y'all are approving this in substantially the same form, so I think
Okay.
that gives us a little flexibility.
Good deal.
And
Thank
for
you.
members of the public, this is essentially on Highway 72, just past the Kroger. So if you're kind of wondering the location, it's right there, accessible to transit, as mentioned earlier, just across the street from Athens Tech. So Commissioner Hamby?
Yeah, sure. I just kind of wanted to talk just briefly. Thank you for bringing this forward to us, but also just to kind of relate how decisions we make on this body have a lasting impact, good or bad. And I think this is a good one. As an example, you mentioned the Kroger, on the Economic Development Authority. Oh gosh, it must have been 10 years ago now. We did do a tax abatement for that Kroger, which is unusual, and we've got a bit of pushback on it. But, in looking where we are today and how that Kroger has benefited the area and has helped helped bring this project along. As a matter of fact, just last week, the Economic Development Authority approved an easement to allow these folks to tap into the Kroger water line on their side. So, and Kroger's happy to do that and happy to have new customers. So I say all that to say, you know, sometimes when we're sitting here behind the rail, we don't realize, you know, we see a nice Kroger coming along, but we don't realize how that's going to really impact a community in a positive way and creates these type of opportunities that come along. So Kelly, you remember all that.
Indeed. No, we've got a whole new mixed-use node now.
Yeah, exactly. So thanks for letting me say that.
Commissioner Thornton?
Well, I remember where there were cows back there. That's what I remember. But I want to ask about the vouchers. Will the vouchers be available through DCA or the Housing Authority, or who will manage the vouchers?
The vouchers will be available through DCA and administered by DCA, but they will work with us on our wait list.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Commissioner Link and then Commissioner Houle.
Yeah, I just have a point of note. The name Athens Flats, is that the name of what the complex is going to be called? I fear a little confusion because we have a Flats or the Flats right there on Oconee Street, a big student housing project. So I fear a little confusion down the line. Y'all might want to look into that.
There's also a flat zone.
Maybe at 2:30 in the morning, New Year's Eve, somebody's going to say, I'd like to go to the flats.
And then
So
they may
share
see those
drive.
cows again.
You don't know where they're going to end up.
Someone,
We'll see those cows again.
yeah, I mean,
Just a little east side, get an east side name on it. East side.
someone might be trying to show up
Especially on New Year's
on
Day.
a football weekend and drive all the way out the other side.
Talk to our marketing talking heads about that.
Yeah, you might want to look into it.
Commissioner Houle?
Thank you, Mayor. Just, I saw that Connie brought like the team with you today, and I know when I was reading this, I was like, who are these folks? So I just wanted to maybe while everyone's here,
Yes,
invite the
and I
opportunity to
apologize for
introduce
not
them briefly.
introducing Nadia. She literally just started today, so let me, so I didn't have her written in my notes, so let me also apologize for not introducing her. But yeah, I'll let them come up and introduce themselves as well.
Like I mentioned before, my name's Corey Stark with Virgin Held on our investments team on the finance side.
Sam Rogers, also with Virgin Held, Senior Vice President of a Development.
And I'm John Toppin with Tapestry Development Group. We're a nonprofit developer. We're based in Decatur, Georgia.
Hi, and I'm Nadia Labadie. I'm his Assistant Project Manager.
Thank you all for coming tonight. I appreciate it very much. Thank you. All right, so we do have a motion from Commissioner Thornton and a second from Commissioner Link on the floor. Everyone ready? Yep. All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? All right, hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everybody. All right. We have an item of new business, and so this is required to be heard under suspension of rules. Can I get a motion for suspension of rules?
So moved.
Second.
All right, I've got a motion from Commissioner Fisher and a second from Commissioner Taylor for suspension of rules. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, we of course remember the approval of the Mall TAD Community Benefits Agreement, and you know that this is, of course, a 75-acre property with lots of moving pieces. One of those moving pieces is our transit facility, and of course, another one of those moving pieces is the existing big box retailer who is there and has a multi-decade lease well into the future. And so we've collectively determined that just to make sure that those things interact well, we're going to need about an additional 6 months to finalize the design for the transit center. And so this is going to move the effective date of the community benefit agreement into the future. When this comes back to us, you're also going to be seeing just some amended language within the CBA. As we've gotten into this, we of course recognize that we're going to have some other bells and whistles that may need some slight adjusting, but not adjusting the substance of the CBA elements. And so we just want to make it better in the future when these kind of situations come up. So Manager Williams, did I clarify that successfully? And is there anything else you would want to add on the front end?
Well, I would just say that, for the folks watching, I mean, this is a complicated deal. And as you go into it, there's just details that have to be worked out. And this really has a lot to do with a better understanding of how our transit facility is going to be constructed and operated and the impact on the longstanding tenant. And they raised a concern that we would have raised. And so, we need to amend ultimately the site plan, because when it was first put together, there was slight overlap of the image we sent over the property lines on the master site plan. And in doing so, it would appear that the buses are sticking out into the travel lane, which is why the tenant said, hey, we're not sure about that. So the other thing that happened in the course of all that is that the commission said, look, any change to that site plan has to come before us. And so it needs to be changed. We agree with the developer. It is not as it will be built one day. And so what we'd like to do in talking with the developer is take the opportunity to go ahead and move further with our design on the transit facility so everyone understands what's going to go there and be better. So I don't see this as highly unusual. This isn't a workaround by the developer or anything like that. It's just clarifying what's ultimately going to go there for all parties involved. And so we need a little bit of time to further design the transit station. The developer's agreed and is asking for an extension to allow us to do that. As the mayor said, we come back to you in 6 months and ask for you to approve the amended site plan that would have more detail. And further, there's an element to this that does benefit us. In getting to this point in the design of the transit station, we learned that there are some concerns about the height and how that would maybe block the mall from this tenant. And so the developer is offering us in exchange for building a one-story building and, the overhangs that would keep folks dry, that the developer could take care of some of our stormwater concerns, which would be of worth to the government of about $400,000 to $900,000. So it's not going to cost them as much to accommodate our stormwater needs as it would for us to do on a very small parcel. So it makes sense for both parties, and that's another facet of this. You're not approving that tonight, but that's how we're going to design the facility without the stormwater, and get to that point in 6 months. So sorry to go on, but those are the details.
I appreciate it. All right, get a motion on the floor for approval of the resolution.
I'll
Move to approve.
I'll second.
All right, I've got a motion from Commissioner Houle, second from Commissioner Fisher. Commissioner Houle, any remarks?
Yeah, I have a couple questions that I'm assuming are not going to change my feelings about supporting my own motion. So I guess I have two for the developer and two for our attorney. I see that Mr. Haynes is in the audience. I don't know if he's here to speak on behalf
Yeah,
of
certainly.
the
If you have
developer.
questions for Mr. Haynes as the developer's agent.
So yeah, I guess these two kind of go together. But my first question is, going through the vibrant process, we'll say, to get our original CBA, there was a lot of urgency that I think we were feeling from your team. But now here we are extending for the second time, which will ultimately be moving back the date by a year. So could you just speak to what you anticipate will be achieved in the coming 6 months that hasn't been achieved in the previous 6 months?
Well, to answer your first question, I'm Scott Haynes. I reside at 281 Clopfilter Road. To answer your first question about urgency, if you think back, we had lots of pressure to close this property, or my clients did at that time. They were under multiple extensions for their commitment to buy the property, and that clock was simply running out when we were up against the approval of this project. They went through a few extensions, and it was getting very, very expensive for them to continue that process. So they reached a point where it had to be resolved, or they were going to have to move off the deal. That explains the urgency. And the question about what will be achieved in the next 6 months, I think really it's a matter for your designers that are working on the transit. We're in full support of whatever they need in terms of the resources we can offer them, review and coordination. But I think it's just generally a clearer picture about what that facility will look like, how it will function, and how it'll become, harmonious with the rest of the development.
Okay, and you anticipate that Belk will be amenable as well?
I believe so. I mean, they've indicated as such throughout the process. I think there was just some details that they want clarified and some things that they raised. I don't think there's anything that's insurmountable. I think we can work through all of those things.
Okay. And then I guess my other question is about, there's some pretty exact, and as I understood it, pretty tight, deadlines, dates on this phase table. So if anybody goes back and looks at the giant CBA that we approved back in the day. I guess I'm curious, it's Schedule 6-1 is what I'm looking at, but I'm sure you're familiar with it. I mean, are any of these dates, these start dates or outside dates, going to be affected by this second extension, or do you think everything is still on track in terms of the timing?
In terms of everything being on timing, in terms of when the effective date starts, I believe that has a bearing on those dates too. Is that correct? That table at 6-1 table?
Yeah, I mean, the earliest start date says 4/30/2024, so we're still, behind that.
I really don't feel like there's going to be a problem. I mean, we are continuing to work on our side for plan development. We've submitted our plans for our LDP. We're continuing on that track, so it hasn't slowed us down any in terms of the plan development, which I think is ultimately going to drive those deadlines. We didn't have a problem making those deadlines before. We've not experienced any setbacks on our end, so I don't see there being any problem with that.
Okay, and so the outside dates of completion, which begin as early as 2027, you think that we're still on track for that as well?
There's no indication that they won't. I mean, I think the extension of the effective date doesn't affect that. I mean, we're continuing on our path. That's been unchanged. We have no delays as of right now. We're still on track, and those dates were, I think, fairly generous in that respect when those things need to come online, so I don't see a problem with that.
All right, thank you.
Certainly.
May I ask my two questions of the
Please.
attorney? Put my own papers on my keyboard here. My first question for you, Attorney Drake. What is your understanding of what, there's a couple things that I think we're still waiting on here. And another thing is Mr. Corbin, our verification agent, needing some further clarification on some items.
Right.
Could you speak to what he's still needing for us to get this whole thing done?
Yeah, well, Mr. Corbin is under the terms of the community benefits agreement. Mr. Corbin is responsible for verifying that 11 Group has the financial capacity to do the Phase 1 infrastructure, which is all the water, sewer, and streets and all that matters. He has advised me that he has gotten the majority of his report done. He has received information related to the financial capacity of the owner, but he is wanting a little more detail from them on that, and that then he'll be able to submit his report. So when he gets that detail, I think he'll submit the report,
Okay. And do you know if he's anticipating getting that detail, or is that still a big
Yeah,
question mark?
I feel like, yes, he is anticipating getting the detail. And,
Okay.
of course, I'm happy to keep the mayor and commission informed as soon as I get it, share that with you.
Okay. And then my last question, I mean, it seems like a lot of this is also dealing with kind of speaking with Belk. Has anyone from your office or for Mr. McCrae's office spoken with Belk directly, or has this been kind of?
We have not, and that concern came up in our last meeting with staff there, and we expressed that we would like an opportunity to talk with Belk, make sure we can help move this process forward. Mr. Mark Jennings indicated that he had a problem with that. He would like to sit down with them first and kind of go over the site plan to make sure that they had the first conference with him, then he was happy to let us, my recollection, he was all right with us meeting with Belk too, and didn't have a problem with that. Is that what you remember, Blaine, in that conversation?
Yes, sir, you recounted that accurately. And I would just say that none of this is non-binding. This is non-binding, of course, but, when we simply adjust the site plan like we intend to, that alleviated a lot of concerns, apparently.
Okay. Thanks. Well, hearing all that, I mean, yeah, I'm glad to move forward with this. Well, I don't know if I'm glad to. I'm satisfied with moving forward on this today. Although I would be remiss to not say I'm not super glad that we're having to do this for a second time. Thanks.
Mr. Fisher?
Yeah, no, Commissioner Hood, same concern I had about the extension and how long it would take to get the project completed. With the transit station, is there gonna be any cost to us having to go back and redesign? Is there gonna be a cost factor in this, or is it gonna cost us more, or since we haven't had, having to extend this thing, is there gonna be a cost involved on our part?
Well, I mean, we were going to underwrite the cost of the design, and this preliminary design, if you will, and I'd have to defer the attorney, and we can get back to you on whether or not that would be reimbursable by the TAD, but at least for where we stand now, we were just going to charge the project that has money for this activity. We don't have enough to build all 3 transfer stations, which is why this makes this an attractive opportunity with the Mall TAD, because the TAD dollars will pay for the facility itself. I'd have to go back and look at the.
Let me help address the,
Sure.
I think what you're saying, I don't think, this is not going to make it cost any more. We're just doing the design earlier than we planned on doing it anyway, if that makes sense.
Yeah, right, yeah.
You follow what I'm saying?
I understand.
Same
Sorry.
assignment.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I should have said it's the cost, but what we've already budgeted is gonna go up anymore. Thank you.
We're just doing it sooner.
Same assignment, new timeline.
Right.
That's
Okay.
right.
I'm sorry.
No, I misunderstood. I
Yeah,
apologize.
Yeah. Okay.
Commissioner Hamby?
Sure, thanks, Mayor. I have a question in the resolution. It's the third from the last, be it resolved. It says, be resolved, the commission grants the mayor, the manager, and the county attorney the authority to take any and all further action necessary to carry out the intents and purposes of this resolution. Is that just as it applies to the transit station?
It's just really as it applies to the getting this, as it applies to getting this extension executed. And also, I would say as it applies to transit station too, needing to get the new design done and all that.
So I guess what I'm saying, I kind of picked up on something you said earlier about when it comes back to us in 6 months, or maybe some other.
Well, I can speak to that.
Amendments.
What Mayor was trying to say.
Okay.
Well, there is going to be amendment to the master site plan. If you remember our discussions with the committee, there's a provision in that master site, in the CBA Community Benefits Agreement right now, that says only material modifications, had to come back to Mayor and Commission. And under that definition, this change would not have constituted a material modification. However, at some point during those deliberations, there was a sentence added that said that any change to the master site plan had to come back to the Mayor and Commission for approval. I think what the mayor was saying, that he feels like that's a little onerous in that regard, and so that he may be looking to add that as we amend the master site plan. He may also be thinking about amending that provision to require only material modifications. Is
As
that
there's
what you're
tension between those two pieces of language, one saying that any substantive modification would come to the commission, and then the other saying essentially any movement of a curb by 2 feet would have to come back to the commission. And so that's where the challenge is.
I guess I would say, and I'll look at the language when it comes to us, but there is a large investment being made in this on behalf of future taxpayer dollars. And somebody's minor modification may be somebody's major modification. And we did work long and hard on that language. I'm not trying to throw a kink in it, but you see where I'm going. I mean,
And I think we can
I've seen it many
detail
times before.
the
where-
distinction between those two elements. Largely, of course, we have the set of community benefits, the exact number of affordable units, the exact square footage of daycare space, the exact amount of green space, the exact amount of trail space and open space and the like. And so no reduction of that would be anticipated. But again, just the example I gave, you may have a curb line that moves 2 feet simply because you get into kind of ground truthing a plan and you realize, we've got just to be a little bit further from GDOT right of way, for example.
Right.
And so that would be the kind of thing that I wouldn't want to have to bring back to the commission.
Okay.
Commissioner Houle?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and I appreciate my colleagues' remarks on this. I think how I feel about it, and I really appreciate, our staff has been, I think, putting a lot of energy into this transit transfer station, because that's a fundamental part of not only this project, but the whole future of our entire county's transit system. And so, I'm certainly amenable to not making it extra onerous for minor modifications to be administratively approved in the future. But I think to Commissioner Hamby's point, maybe it'll be easier to feel more confident that all is well and done once some work is actually happening in the ground. But while we're still living in the theoretical, I'm hesitant to feel good about just administratively approving things that might have some pretty substantial ripple effects on, very large and key components to this project, of which the transit transfer station is among the largest.
Manager Williams?
And we'll propose language and y'all can review it. I guess just a corollary would be, a plan development. So that is a binding site plan. And currently, Director Griffin and staff, they have the ability to move things just slightly in a PD, and that's what I think everybody was accustomed to. So we will try and come up with language that is suitable and put that before y'all in 6 months.
All right, so we have a motion and a second on the floor from Commissioner Hool and Commissioner Fisher. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? All right, hearing none, motion carries. All right, I do need a motion to enter into executive session for discussion of real estate acquisition and/or disposal following our agenda setting session.
So moved. Second.
All right, got a motion from Commissioner Wright and a second from Commissioner Fisher. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
And Mr. Mayor, to confirm, there'll be no action anticipated after that, correct?
That is correct. Just simply discussion in that executive session. All right. And I'll have a motion to adjourn our special called session upon conclusion of that executive session.
So moved.
All right, got a motion from Commissioner Link, second from Commissioner Taylor. All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All right, any opposed? All right, we will go home tonight. All right, that's what we're promising everyone. All right, we're going to move to our agenda setting session. Rules of public input are the same. Currently, we have a consent agenda comprised of items 1 through 6, and then old and new business, which are items 7 through 18. Before we move to public input on the consent agenda, would any commissioner like to remove an item from consent?
Number 2, please.
All right, 2, Commissioner Link. Any others? Commissioner Fisher?
Can I go to new business? That's all.
Just 1 through 6. Is there any of those that you want to have individual discussion on? Commissioner Hool?
3 and 6. Just for questions.
All right. So, members of the public, anyone who would like to speak to 1, 4, or 5, now is that time. 1, 4, or 5. All right. We're going to move on then. Anyone who would like to speak to 2, 3, or 6 through 18. 2, 3, or 6 through 18. Would any member of the public like to speak to 2, 3, or 6 to 18? Give everybody a moment. All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move to discussion. And we're going to begin with item 2. And Commissioner Link, you asked that this be removed. And this is regarding the Prince Avenue corridor improvement under the SPLOST 2018 program. And this is funds from that bucket for a loading zone on Meigs Street.
Yeah, and from what I understand, this is to one-way that segment of Meigs Street that goes behind the Bottle Works and comes into Prince Avenue at an angle, which I certainly agree makes sense. It's really, it can be really dangerous having cars shoot across Prince to try and get onto that street. I'm just wondering how much consultation has occurred with the business owners from the Bottle Works and the other businesses that back up to that street.
I'll verify that with staff.
Okay, because I know in the past we've had proposals to close the little segment of Newton Street, and and then business owners came out against that. So I just want to make sure that we're definitely keeping everybody in the loop on all this.
Commissioner Hamby?
Sure. And to help with Commissioner Link's question, we have an ADDA meeting this week, and perhaps we can bring that up and
Yes.
have ADDA also help staff figure
That
out.
would be great.
figure out
Yeah, thank
what
you.
What the appetite is. I do have a question that's slightly off topic from this, but it deals with Prince Avenue. At what point, I remember when we three-laned it, we talked about
Mm-hmm.
doing some sort of permanent curbing instead of the, I don't know what you call those things. So at what point will we see that come back to us?
I think we're within a few months of coming back to you. We were hoping by the end of this year, so we're pretty close to bringing those final design changes back.
Okay.
And that would include the peripheral tie-ins to various streets and sidewalks and whatnot.
Okay.
Closing driveways, that type of thing.
Okay, good, thank you.
It's imminent. But I will follow up with a more specific answer than that.
Y'all want to leave this off consent?
Yes.
Okay. All right, we're going to move to item 3, and this is the calendar year 23 Pavement Maintenance Program, change to the existing contract. Commissioner Hool?
Yeah, I was just wondering if, I read through the agenda report, and it was a little unclear to me why the delay. There's a lot about, what the pavement maintenance program is and everything, but why is additional time needed to complete what, under the initial bid, was assumed to be completed without needing an extension?
I'll have to ask about that. I mean, it's a big contract, it's like $7 million, and so sometimes weather will make you run out. There's extenuating circumstances, but it's not a sizable change order. I think it's just over 300,000, so it's just sort of cleaning some stuff up.
Heard, yeah. Just over 300,000 still takes away about a fifth of the LMIG funds that we're talking about later on this agenda, so, 300,000, still 300,000. And I did see that there was talk about that study, I think it was Commissioner Wright who was pushing for this before, where we've got those trucks that are looking at like curbing that's underneath the asphalt. So I'm curious, is that what this is related to, or the streets that are being pushed down related to information that was learned from that, or is that just mentioned separately but unrelated?
Not sure I understand the question, sorry. And let me also say, I didn't mean to trivialize 300,000, it's a lot of money, but it's 5% of the overall award, so I don't think overly concerning.
See if I can find on here what I'm talking about. So history number 20 speaks to the KCI Technologies task order to develop curb and gutter inventory and curb reveal elevation. And so reading this, I was inferring, could that be why this is being kicked out? Because they have to do more than was initially anticipated because of that, or is it just unrelated? But
It's just to address some of the patching needs that we've developed over the course of the year that are needed on some listed streets.
okay. Yeah, I guess if staff can bring back a little more information about why the delay, I'd appreciate that. I'm okay with leaving it on consent.
But the answer to your
Can pull it again if that answer seems too odd, but,
But the answer to your specific question was no. That's not
okay,
causing it.
thanks.
Any additional questions about 3? All right, we're moving on to 6, and this is the Recovered Material Processing Facility, generally known as the MRF. And this is the proposed project concept, and you can kind of read about the substance of what you'll be seeing in the new MRF in the agenda report. Commissioner Hool, you had a question about this as well?
Yeah, apologies if I missed this somewhere, but I didn't see any mention of solar anywhere on here. And we're talking about a 35 to 50,000 square foot building at the landfill, which doesn't have a whole lot of trees to get in the way. So I guess my maybe two-part question is this the phase where we would need to mention solar so that at least solar readiness is built into the concept? Even if we were to use a different funding source, like say the 100% sustainability funding from SPLOST?
Answer
You
is
still need to
yes.
build that into the concept, okay. I'd like to leave this off consent then to get an understanding of if some kind of CDO would be needed to make sure that solar is built into it. And if the colleagues are amenable, I would think that this is an example of where we'd want to see that.
And I would say that just knowing pricing what it is, that it may very well be that we need to tap an outside funding source like the energy improvements to help augment the construction budget.
Commissioner Myers?
Yeah. If you, as you're looking into that, if you'd also get a perspective from the Sustainability Office and those working on energy, what their evaluation of the use of funds is for this project. I'd appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am.
Any others? All right. Moving on to 7, this is the request to rename Rocksprings Park and Community Center. This was previewed in our last agenda. It will be Christine Howard Park. And so this also provides the funds for the signage change as well. Any input on this?
I would like to leave it on
I'd like to see it on consent.
consent.
All right, consent, everybody okay? All right, perfect. All right, 8 is the Judiciary request for ARPA funds, and as you see in the agenda report, the amount of funds that the state is releasing is significantly less than originally anticipated, and thus you see this amended agenda report. Any input on this? Okay with consent? Oh, Commissioner Gould?
Consent.
Yeah. I did, sorry. I guess I was a little puzzled by this and then
Yeah.
reread this a second time and thought maybe I had answered myself, but I wanted to clarify with staff. So, this body allotted a fair amount of increased funding to various judicial offices last year, including for some one-time expenses. Am I understanding attachment 3 correctly, that many of the expenses that we approved in our budget will now be paid for with those ARPA funds that are left over? Or is that something?
I haven't reconciled the budget with what they're requesting for ARPA.
Okay.
But this is what the Chief Justice, Eric Norris, Chief Superior Court Judge, had submitted to the ARPA committee for consideration for how it's funded. So we can reconcile that with anything that was allocated for those.
Okay. I mean, ultimately, getting more ARPA money for our judicial system is something I'm inclined to very much support. But reading through this report, it sort of struck me that if you look at Facts and Issues 9, it says that they're anticipating having 1.5 million of unspent ARPA funds. And I'm just thinking, if our courts have 1.5 million in unspent ARPA funds, why are we putting more money into various projects with general fund money, if there's ARPA money that could be paying for it instead? Or is attachment 3 actually indicating that Judge Norris's intention is to use some of this ARPA money to pay for some of those things?
We'll clarify
Understanding
that.
that would be helpful.
Sure.
Commissioner Myers?
And while you're at that, I was a little confused about this too. I read it over. I don't understand why we have so much unspent money left over. And I didn't see that addressed. Was there a plan? Did it not go through? Anyway, I'd like to be able to understand that. And also that money was meant to be used for the getting caught up with the backlog of cases. And I'm wondering where we are in that as well. Perhaps we could get some responses to that.
Well, part of the 1.5 million, if you'll remember, and they've been asking for years in our budgeting process for additional funds for audio-visual upgrades. And of course, we were deferring on some of that, thinking that, the judicial center was imminent, but they just have to have some things. So part of that 1.5 million was set aside for the AV upgrades. They've got an RFP out, and so they'll be spending that money. It takes a little while to get these things into place, but things are moving forward. And I will also say that if you'll remember, things have changed a lot in the last few years, and there was a lot of concern and funds set aside for trials at the Classic Center. We never had to do that. So there were some things that were intended, knowing what little we knew at the time. But I can assure you that all the money's being rolled forward. So I will guarantee you they'll have every penny allocated before it's done.
Commissioner Taylor?
Wasn't this also to help DA Gonzalez get field positions? I'm for it.
A lot of this was geared towards the backlog, if you'll remember. So we got behind, and they're still struggling with that. And there's some bottlenecks there. But that is what they're intending to still try to use the money for, is to help alleviate the backlog.
Everybody okay with this on consent, knowing you're going to get some additional information?
I'd like to keep it off if we could.
Yes.
And since Commissioner Hull has pulled this off of consent, could you find out where we are with the backlog by next week?
All right, item 9 is, of course, on old business as well, and this is carryover of the revisions to Chapter 5.5 of our Code of Ordinances, the Stormwater Utility Ordinance. Were there any new questions about this that anyone wanted to raise?
I may have some within the next month, before voting session.
Okay.
On consent, leave it off consent.
Yeah.
Commissioner Myers?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I feel like I'm continuing to learn more and more about stormwater management. And so I noticed one of the points made in here that we'd be able to, I guess with 3B, the addition is that you'd be able to work on, use the money for retention ponds in neighborhoods that are not covered in HOAs. And that's the additional that's the addition with the 3B, is that correct?
Well, so at its basic level, what the fee is supposed to fund is a certain level of service. And so, revisiting it after almost 20 years, the committee recommended that there be an increase in the level of service. And certainly, what you mentioned is one piece of that, but there are, I think, some other expanded level of service. For instance, what's called the ROC program.
Oh, yeah, I really just meant
sorry.
the difference between the 3 and the 3B.
I got you.
Because that's what we added from the last time. So we have the ROC program, but we also have added on this, in 3B, we added on this retention pond or stormwater management. But HOAs take care of their own, which I'm learning now because I have some HOAs discussing this a lot. So that was in there. I guess I'll send you some of my questions that I had, rather than put them out here now when you might not have the technical answers.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, sounds good. All right, item 10, under new business, is approval of the scope of work for the ARPA-funded homelessness activities. And of course, this will be item for discussion on Thursday at the work session.
Okay, well, because I was going to ask him fully, but we're going to talk about it. I'll save my questions then to Thursday, then I don't.
Yeah, you'll get a kind of full presentation, just given the nature of this month, since we're going to cram the 2 meetings into 3 weeks. We're a little bit out of order.
I'll save my questions then to Thursday.
Perfect. All right, item 11 is the RFP for the Unified Pay Plan Classification Comprehensive Study. Members of the body recall that we are on a recurrent basis, or alternating basis, I should say, looking at those public safety positions and then the rest of our compensation. And so this is the non-public safety employee classification and pay analysis. Commissioner Houle?
Just curious if staff yet had any updates, or if we can expect one before January on this idea of incorporating a wage floor that adjusts over time with something like the MIT calculator as part of how this pay plan structure that we're asking them to put together will look.
That wasn't in the RFP that went out. And so all we can do is try and see if we can negotiate, if that's what the commission wants, with the bidder, or we could do a change order after the fact once it's more fully defined.
And there's something somewhat close to it in the punch list of tasks, and I won't be able to pull it out of the agenda report right at this moment, but I'll highlight that just in email.
Yeah, I
And
guess
so we-
reading through it, I didn't see anything that explicitly addresses that. I mean, it references the wage floor that we put in as part of the cause for needing to address compression in the new pay plan, but it doesn't speak to asking, this vendor to come up with, or whoever we end up going with, it's still TBD on this item, but it doesn't specify if or how they would incorporate into their recommendation moving forward a way for building that in. Yeah.
It's not. It's not an RFP, and so we'd have to negotiate it after the fact. And I just want to say that I think it's a great idea, but it is intricate. I mean, you've got 400 positions, 1,800. You've got 400 distinct job descriptions, and you have 1,800 employees with different tenures, rates of pay, things like that. So in order to create a spreadsheet that would be dead accurate on all those folks that were indexed every time that changed, that's something that's going to be cost some money, I think.
Yeah, I hear you, and I guess it's just if not now, then when would we do that, I guess to me is the question. I mean, the big issue we ran into is that we kind of forced that wedge in, and bumped up the wage floor real quick. And so if we don't want to have to repeat that again to make sure we're not paying people less than what someone needs to afford to live here, I would think now's the time to build that into a future structure, however complicated it needs to be. In my mind, it might be simplified by just saying there's 2 factors to look at when calculating our pay table, which is kind of the figure, right now they look at market. And so I think if we just say, well, when you're looking at pay table, look at market and also look at cost of living with something like the MIT Living Wage Calculator, certainly my favorite tool to reference as the benchmark. And then the whole structure is built around that. But that's all I'm really looking for, is that those 2 factors are built into what we consider our base level.
Well, I think what we need to do is with the successful entity, ask them to give us a cost for that, and then we would come back to you and have you approve that.
And I've found what I was looking for. So it's on page 266 of the PDF, and it's task E. In that task list, there are several task lists, and it's living wage reconciliation. So I don't know if we can use that as the foundation or platform for that deeper conversation with the vendor.
And I think Commissioner Hull's correct. I mean, that's sort of a, reconcile what we're dealing with now, but a more dynamic model. I think, I could be wrong. Maybe we should ask them and insist that that's part of
What
it.
PDF is that? The agenda item I have, it does not have 266 pages.
This is
451.
This is the download from
The big one.
the big one.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's on page 18 of the document
Okay. Thanks.
under proposed deliverables relative to the unified pay table. So the bottom of page 17 of that document,
Okay.
you see updated pay table, and then on the top of 18, the next page, proposed deliverables, and then the task list, A through H. And this is item E, living wage reconciliation. So if we can use that just as the conduit to maybe that deeper question about how do we manage this on an ongoing annual basis, I would enjoy that.
Yeah, I guess the thinking here is it's not just about rectifying the issue we've run into from what we've previously done. It's also about setting us up to not ever have to do that again, right?
That's right. That's right. Commissioner Thornton?
I guess, just to follow up, the RFP has already been sent out, and what's the deadline on it?
It's already come and gone.
Come and gone, okay. And so my next,
They're evaluating the responses.
oh, okay. And I guess I'm agreeing with Commissioner Hull on this. This was such a rocky issue. I just think that we've had enough time to make sure, or brought it back to us to make sure it's in the RFP. I do not want us to have to go around that battle we went with the last wage increase. I think it's very significant. I think this should be one of the key things on how to set that wage floor in these interviews. How do you do that? And folks should be able to give us some idea of how to do it, so we do not have to go around this again. That should be one of the key things, I think, in the interviewing and reviewing of the application.
I'd like to live in a budget prep process where there's not manual manipulation of the floor, but that there's a natural way for that to happen. Commissioner Myers?
Yeah, I just want to add my agreement with Commissioner Thornton and Commissioner Hull, and it's seemingly the mayor as well, that, we are a role model in the community. People are following our lead. We're talking about affordable housing. The affordable housing, it's affordable depending on how much money you're making. So we can help people with housing by making sure that we are a leader in paying a livable wage. I was with someone 2 weeks ago, and I was talking about a position. They were talking about where they would be getting, someone would be getting paid $25 an hour, and she was talking about her son in the late 20s, and she was like, oh, he couldn't take that. It's not a livable wage. He wouldn't be able to live anywhere at $25 an hour. And I know that this is just anecdotal, but the reality is it's very difficult to find a place to live out there. So I think we can be a leader in this.
Commissioner Thornton?
When we went to the top out at the arena, one of the speakers was so proud that they're committed to this livable wage, and I think he said $15.61. By the time the arena is built, it's not going to be a livable wage. But that is what we discussed. That was the dollar amount. That was what we got all excited about. But by the time that arena is built, it's not going to be $15.61.
Commissioner Wright?
Yeah, obviously, this isn't going on consent because it's still to be determined and all that. So the part of, has there been an interview process? You said, it's wrapping up to know who's the best bid. So it could be that the ideas that are coming now aren't part of this it has to be like a round two defined, because I think that we need to talk together about all this so that, one, we're not competing. Definitely don't want to replay what all happened with the seasonal part-time and how, we had commission-defined options to change salaries, and it caused not a very good ripple effect. I want to make sure we don't have that, but I also want to make sure that we're not changing it so much that the public safety improvements from the pay scale are then competing with this one. So there's got to be some, in my mind, consistency with how we're fixing this. There might not be an answer to it now, but it seems like it's something for a bigger discussion, like you say, with who the proper vendor, the best vendor is, and see if there's going to be a change order, or if, from what the mayor pointed out, there might be a little summary of how their solution to it is.
Yes.
So there's more to come without holding up this agenda item.
Yes.
In January, which will have the name. And then, do we know enough to know if the previous classification study vendor is in the running? Did they apply?
Well,
Or is that something we can know?
if you're talking the one that we've most recently used, I do believe they applied. The 2018 vendor, I'm not sure if they're in the mix or not.
Okay, thanks.
All right, more to hear on this. All right, 12 is the Neighborhood Traffic Management Program, and you can see the projects that are going to be managed through your generous allocation of funds. So Commissioner Hamby?
Sure, thank you, I appreciate it. And Manager Williams helped me to avoid an aneurysm this afternoon when I was looking at the agenda report, and there was one, I guess, typo correction that needs to be made of the list that's there. It's not to be completed in May of 2025, but in May of 2024. So thank you for clarifying that for me. I do have a question, though, about the revenue sources. And I do remember us putting in, and Blaine, I spoke to you, Manager Williams, on the phone earlier about this. We did put some money in for FY24 for some of the revenue sources, but I don't notice it on there, and I don't know if you're transferring SPLOST over, which I guess would be fine. Leave us short for future project, neighborhood traffic stuff as it comes along.
Well, I appreciate your keen eye, Commissioner Hamby, and I did. Thanks for calling me and asking prior, so I could report back that that $420,000 that's listed in the agenda item is the FY24. The FY23 was a typo too.
Okay.
So that is accounted for here.
Well, if I remember correctly, during this whole discussion, there was already some money in there for FY23 for neighborhood.
And I'm going to go back and
capital.
look at that. And it could be that it's an identical figure and it's 23 and 24.
Yeah, I
but
want to say there was 300 in there and then we were.
But we're going to go back and look at that since you brought it up.
And I did see also, I think this is good, that the bid amount is less than what we were projecting when we were going through the budget process. So that saves a bit of money there. So, okay, good. I'm looking forward to this. I've got several constituents for those streets who have been asking about this. Thank you.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, so I'm happy to see Peter Street on this list. I have a question. There is some SPLOST money for East Athens transportation improvements. Is that money available for this? How does that figure in? Is this separate from that pot of money?
There were a number of specific projects for that, and I'd have to go back and look. We are now constituting the user group to go ahead and start those discussions, and there are a number of small projects, and we're going to have one user group kind of oversee a good many of those, and a separate one for the MLK Greenway. It's a little bit different.
Yeah, well, Vine Street's on here too, and First Street, they're all in that area that has a SPLOST bucket for it. I also noticed Oglethorpe Avenue's on here, and there seems to be some unclarity about the stretch of Oglethorpe. It says...
Oglethorpe is the terminus of Forest Heights Drive. And so it's just showing the kind of starting and stopping point of where the Forest Heights Drive project will be as.
Oh, so it's
Oglethorpe.
Forest Heights
That's
Drive.
correct, yeah. So the
Okay.
first column is the roadway, actually, that's going to be getting the treatment. And then the next two columns are kind of where that set of termini.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay, so I'm a little confused about those columns. All right, so Arch Street is the one that's getting the,
The roadway.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's Arch Street and then,
From North Peter to
okay, and then
Government.
Carver Street and Vine Street. So Peter Street and First Street are not on this study area, but they could be considered in that TSPLOST bucket. Okay, yeah, I was confused about the columns and the stretch of road. All right,
Well, right now, they would be paid for out of these funds, and we'd like the user group to be able to get in and take a look at the needs over there before we could try and commit any of those.
okay.
Commissioner Taylor?
I think the first thing that the user group would say is, well, why isn't LMIG getting any improvements? I see that there's an asterisk beside it that says that it's a non-local street and it doesn't meet the policy. And just for giggle's sake and for, my community's understanding, could you, tell us exactly why it didn't meet the current policy? Just for Nellie Avenue, because I know, there's been, talks, people calling me about Nellie Avenue needing, and I have seen the road work on Fairview. So awesome for that, but just for District 3, could you kind of speak to, or someone speak to, why Nellie Avenue doesn't meet the requirements?
Yes, it's not considered a local street, but I'll give you some more information in the follow-up as to why.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Myers?
Yeah, I'm excited about this, and perhaps I'm saying some of these things just for myself, but it's going to be for all of us pretty soon, because this neighborhood traffic management program is using our present criteria and ordinance, and I just want to make it clear to the group that the Legislative Review Committee is now probably ready in January to vote on a revision to that. So, which actually has a little section where we explain local and different types of roads, which I think will be helpful to everyone involved. So this is, when we get to this policy in a month, it's going to be a different policy than the one that's used here, that hopefully is even more equitable, because as we know, this is a policy that looks at speed and looks at numbers of cars going, the number of cars, the traffic on a road, but requires a lot of work from staff, but also for neighbors to really get that 65% of people signing on. And so we have some exciting new technological advances that are coming along to help us, or that are here already. But I'm excited about this moving forward here, and just for our LRC group, as I'm seeing this, there are the projects that are lined up for the pilot study, and perhaps something for us to consider is, or answer is, what happens to those pilot study? Like, where are they? Because I don't think we were considering them in terms of funding for something more permanent. And also, are we building the quick build into our new policy? Is that one of the options that'll be there? So that's just an aside, but I'm happy to see this move forward.
Do you want any observations from staff, or just?
I don't think we need any observations now, but I know that my head gets filled with one thing and then another thing. And, the traffic management stuff, these are things that I hadn't thought about at our LRC meeting last week, but reading this agenda item makes me think of, and I want to make sure I have a really helpful staff here to remember that as well, and my fellow members of the LRC.
Commissioner Gould?
Yeah, I'm hesitant to get too into specific streets too much, but I'm hearing Commissioner Taylor bring up something I think we've heard about for years, including from Commissioner Parker before as well, that Nellie B. Avenue is a road that specifically lots of residents in the area feel they need attention. And when I look at the list of streets that we've got on that LRC report, Nellie B. Avenue is not listed there either. So maybe that's something staff can look at between now and the next LRC meeting, is just why is that road in particular not included, so we can address Commissioner Taylor's concerns.
That's what we were going to follow up on.
And just for members of the public who might be watching, there are other kinds of treatments that can go on collector and arterial roads. For example, you may have some lane narrowing, or you may have some curb aperture changes, that are going to have a comparable effect, that are going to slow traffic by design in the same way we've done on some other roads. So I think everybody immediately thinks of speed tables or the like, but there are a lot of other treatments that can slow traffic. Commissioner Thornton.
Well, I do think that Commissioner Myers, I knew what you were talking about. I don't know if anybody else did at that moment, but I do think the old policy is the reason why a lot of streets that should have street calming doesn't. And now that we have data that we will bring to this board and would answer some of your questions, so then there'll be a new process which I think would make it much easier for those streets that need those street calming concepts. I know that's what Commissioner Myers was saying, but I don't know if anybody else knew what she was saying. The old process is why a lot of streets, especially in my neighborhood, and that's going to change. Hopefully that will change with the vote of this commission.
Yeah, just to clarify, I was looking at the list of streets we got in the LRC committee meeting. For whatever reason, Nellie B. Avenue specifically is not on that list either, even though a bunch of other streets that we've talked about
But that's
are.
because I'm not going to argue the detail. I'm just saying, getting those signatures, getting people, those kind of things do not traditionally happen in, especially in communities of color. So I think the new process will make sure that Nellie B., and that's my assumption, and those areas that have been overlooked for a while will get some loving or attention.
Well, if I could, so the main reason, Commissioner Taylor and Hool, that it is a collector. And so there are different classifications of streets, local residential, then collector, arterial, so on and so forth. And so, just so folks can understand what we're all talking about here, those are higher speed roads. And on certain higher speed roads, introducing obstructions in the road may not be safe. And so that's something that the committee's going to have to kind of work through. And then the other thing I just want to say is that it's also a resource issue. So the commission has, over time, lowered the thresholds for inclusion in the program. And that's laudable in that, you're going to spread the street safety around. It's just going to become more and more streets that will be eligible that need to be funded too. So it's also a resource priority, I think.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, there's been significant research that shows that street trees have an impact on calming traffic. Is that part of the toolbox that TPW has? And some of these roads that are collectors that are higher speeds could benefit from that if you couldn't put a speed bump on them.
I don't believe so. I can ask staff. Chicane would be something.
Yeah, I mean, I can send y'all I have a folder full of street tree information. But yeah, it's definitely proven to reduce speeds, and that might be something that could apply to collectors. And regular crosswalks too help.
Well, and I'll say too that I know GDOT has a limitation on the caliper of trees that they want to see because it is an obstruction, and if you hit it, it will damage things. And if y'all remember, even in the roundabout, like at Whitehall, the arc that goes in the middle, we have it as a cutaway, so if it's hit. So those are just things, as we put things to slow folks down, we also don't want to increase the severity of crashes. But I'll ask staff on that one.
Yeah, and certainly I think about a recent GDOT-approved project in Coney County next to us where on the I don't know if they call it the Oconee County connector there, but on the segment of road that connects Epsbridge Parkway to Oconee County High School, there are trees there. And of course, I think it was because of the caliper size that they selected the trees that ultimately ended up in that median strip. Commissioner Taylor?
I do remember the conversation that we had about Nellaby Avenue being a collector and the limitations that it put. But even if we can get like a flashing light for the crossing, like on North Avenue, you know, that's fine. We don't have to have speed bumps. I don't agree with having speed bumps on Nellaby Avenue. I would drive Nellaby Avenue myself. I don't think I'd appreciate the speed bumps, but the crossing from Rashi's to the other side would be.
And that will be, as I understand it, part of the study area for the TSPLOST project that we talked about earlier. One of several that are going to be supporting.
And I think excellent ideas, Commissioner Taylor, and I'm hopeful in the LRC deliberation that they will look at different treatments for different, roads, for sure.
Can I also make a recommendation? If we could turn like that area, once you get past Rashi's, right where the transit bus goes to, into a possible four-way stop, I think that would curb a lot of the speeding because, coming out of Fairview is already a stop. The other side, Gresham Street, is a stop. And so if there could be, some residents brought that to me. It's not my own, but I thought I would put that out there.
I could ask the traffic engineer to take a look at that and see if that's possible. And then there's a process to go to having that installed that does culminate in the commission approval.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Thornton?
I would like to say, I really appreciate learning all the traffic calming methods or things that I would have never thought were traffic calming or the reason for traffic calming. And an average person doesn't even know that. So I think it's good for all of us to as we're going through this process. And I would, if this wasn't in LRC, I probably wouldn't know some of this stuff. So I think it's just good information.
All right. More to be seen here. All right, item 13 is the 2024 Georgia Department of Transportation Local Maintenance Improvement Grant, or LMIG, application submittal. Any questions about this? Mike?
Thank you. I just have a quick question about this. I guess we'll see a larger list later on, perhaps, or is this looks like are we trying to finish up 2021 stuff? Is that what this is about?
So every year when we submit the LMIG application, they want some sense of the roads that we might.
Right.
It's only a partial list, and it's not the final list. We have to give them something. So most of this is accurate, as a straw holder, but y'all will approve the final list when you award the contract to the successful vendor.
Okay. It did say 2021 on the chart. I don't know if you noticed that or not, as instead of 2023.
Okay, I'll look at that.
And as far as the streets go there, where the list of streets are.
Okay.
And so if I have a question about a particular street, I can call you and see where it might land on the list that hasn't been done in a while.
Yes, but as you said, the final list will come to you in a few months.
Yeah, I figured it comes around March or somewhere like that. Okay, thank you.
Everybody okay with consent?
I say leave it off, please.
Okay. All right, we're moving on to vendor selection of the contract award for the Leisure Services Comprehensive Master Plan that was funded through our last 2 years of general fund budget. Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I'm looking at facts and issues, the scope of the project. I just want some idea of how much public input is we're asking for along the way. I don't know that it's indicated in this scope, but I want to make sure that there's a clear direction that we want broad public input at every major step along the way of this master plan. And outreach, the kind of outreach, interactive outreach, where you have events where people are able to ask questions and have discussions in groups rather than just filling out surveys or approaching a table.
Well, and this is the thing, and I appreciate that last example that you gave because, and I'm glad we will respond to that question and tell you the methods and means by which we would try to get public input. Of course, people have to come and share. So if you can give me specific instances, will this type of method be employed, I can answer that. But globally, we get questions like, well, how much public input do you want? And my answer is all of it. But what does that look like? And so if you tell us specifically what you're thinking, and then I can tell you whether or not it's in there, in addition to what we're generally going to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very helpful to, at least at the beginning of the process and at the very end of the process, when you have a draft that's ready to be tweaked, to have those kind of public meetings where people can have a back and forth with the folks who are putting the plans together, and people like us can show up and hear some of that back and forth. Where there's actually a conversation rather than just, checking some boxes on a survey.
Well, and what we would appreciate too is we would hope that you would electrify your networks, activate your networks to get people there. One thing that I think folks have to understand is that if you have open conversations like that, oftentimes someone who's not used to this said, well, I said it, I didn't see it in the plan. And so, it's an imperfect science where you get impressions and thematically you go back and do that. So as you tell folks, this isn't just a rubber stamp. I mean, we want to hear what they have to say, and oftentimes there's things that staff or the consultant hadn't thought of.
Yeah.
But just the understanding that there are a lot of voices, and what comes out is sort of a synthesis of all those things. Because I don't want folks to show up, and I've seen it happen, where I said this in this meeting, and you can go to the video and you can see it right there, and you guys didn't pay attention to what I had to say.
Yeah. Well, that's why, you give them cards and
Sure.
encourage them to write it down, which TPW's been really good about in recent meetings. But-
No, you're right, and we would of course say that too. But I think part of this is just we want more people to interact with government. And I think if we can all manage the expectations coming in on how it works, instead of just saying, hey, just show up and don't tell them anything, and then they have a different expectation about what's going to happen, they may not feel like their voice was heard, and that's not the case. So we all have to educate and spread awareness. So if y'all could help with that too, we appreciate it.
Commissioner Hamby?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. And, and this has come up in the last two budget cycles, and I've argued against spending dollars on this because I think, we do have we see all these awards that we get for our leisure services, and I'm just, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, if we're getting all these awards, what do we, there's always room for improvement. Certainly, I think looking at how we are able to serve people that may have some disabilities and such as that, I think should be part of our master plan discussion, especially for kids, as we've talked about before. But I will say this, it's all a matter of priorities too. So I know this project's cost us roughly a little bit over $400,000. In just a few minutes, we'll see where the Memorial Park pool renovation is about $400-something thousand. Did I say 400 million? I meant 400,000. $400,000, and we'll see here in a minute that the Memorial Park pool renovation is also about $400,000. So at some point, we got to start thinking we don't have a money tree out back that we can shake for things, and so we just got to make sure that when we go through these exercises that we're able to explain to the people we represent how it's going to benefit us long term, and from that standpoint. So just my two thoughts.
Benefit of this master plan is it will help us prioritize kind of over a long arc of time moving forward. I can say that it's an unusual week when I don't have somebody advocating for their particular passion within our leisure offerings, and sometimes that's arts, and sometimes it's pickleball, and sometimes it's swimming, and sometimes it's soccer fields or trails. And of course, when that individual is talking to you, you hear their passion, you feel it, and you understand it because they're so invested in that pursuit. And this will allow us to, I think, sort of pursuant to your comments, Commissioner Link, really get that feeling from the entire community, not just those folks who might happen to encounter me. Let's see, Commissioner Myers.
Yeah, I wanted to point out, because it's kind of hard to find in here, there is the whole project proposal they put forth, starting on page 34 of the single agenda item one. And so there were several pages of discussion of the public engagement in there. And I would assume in the contract, usually those things get very specific about how many of this and how many of that there are. I do appreciate getting this more sort of global, like stepping back and getting a little bit of a global perspective on what we're doing with leisure services, because, I mean, leisure services, that's where all the fun happens, you know, from the Christmas parade, which was absolutely wonderful, and that new trolley was great. But it pulls back and it's looking at the whole community. All of us are coming in here with, you know, I'm on the east side, you're on the west side, you're here, you play pickleball, you have kids playing basketball. So we all have our different perspectives, and so I appreciate getting a more global view of our leisure services. Do we know how, like, far out in the future this plan is going to look? Is this I couldn't find that, it's probably in there somewhere, but is it like a, you know, is it a 20, 15-year plan, 20-year plan? If we could maybe get an answer to that, how far we are looking into the future, I'd appreciate that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Thornton.
I was going to ask a couple of questions. I know this is, I know that this is not in working mode, but as we're doing these contracts and awards with RFPs, even though we don't have an official disparity plan, are we even putting that into in our thought pattern on who we're, you know, receiving these RFPs? Even though we don't, it's in GOC, but, you know, we're putting RFPs out back to back, so somebody, I would hope, would just have it in the back of their mind. That was one question, and or one thought. That's not even a question. And my other thought is, there was a grant that Leisure Services applied for about a year ago, and it was for tennis court, tennis thing, and we added Satterfield on there. Has there been any word on that grant, or did we not get it?
I believe it was successful, but yeah, we'll check on it.
Because we added Satterfield on that grant, and we hadn't heard anything.
It wasn't just the tennis courts, it was a football field, too.
It was the football field. That's what we added on there.
That's right.
So we hadn't heard about that one.
Let me check for sure. I hope I have good news to share. I'm
Okay,
feeling like we do.
and my last thing is, I do agree with Commissioner Link that we, you know, just to get a big picture from everybody, or as many people as possible. I do think it's a part of our role as commissioners. When we did the North Avenue survey, you know, I worked with the churches in that area. We still didn't blow up the data, but we did good. And again, when we have these types of events that we want community input, I'm going to say it every time, we need to use our neighborhood leaders. They work tremendously. We got equipment from staff. And the other thing, when we have these kind of events, I think they should, or if we create these kind of events, I think we should go where there's already a built-in audience. If the schools are having parent-teacher night, set up a table. If there's an event at one of the fields, have it there. I think sometimes people are too tired to just come to a whole bunch of different meetings, but if you combine them with things that are already going on, you're going to get some different opinions, because usually when you do it the way we normally do it, it's the same folk that come. It's the same folk that show up. And that's no criticism on anybody. But I do think we need to be more intentional if we want to get more diverse information. But yes, if you could find out about that grant with Satterfield, I'd appreciate it.
Well, staff's already let me know, so I do have good news to share. We did get the grant. And Phase 1, if you'll remember, is Hurd Park. That's underway.
Right.
And then Satterfield plans are being created now, and that's scheduled for a spring or summer completion.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wright?
Thank you. I did want to point out, and we have time to read over this, but the weighting of the applicants, 30 points for project approach and community engagement is also 30 points. And there's 6 bullets there, so you'll know what the assessment level was for the public engagement there. And in looking for that detail, I came across that the mandatory meeting for the applicants was in June, and this RFP ended in August. I think we could move this forward before we lose what they said they can do in their people, because, anyway. But I also, this piggybacks a little bit with what Carol Myers was saying, Commissioner Myers was saying, was that one of the reasons we had asked as a group for a master plan for leisure services in our facilities was because we did end up bickering. I'm not supporting your facility because my facility needs something, and it got to where the recommendation was, let's have an not unbiased entity, but the master plan, so that we could have a cohesive approach, so that staff was prioritizing. And I know that the 2 parks, Memorial and Bishop, that have been loved to death, those are kind of in emergency fix modes, so those are moving faster. But there were times when it was some of our leisure services agenda items got to be a little heavier in territorial.
Good point.
I don't know if I think it maybe even stalled a few. So I think this in the long run is going to help. And I'm glad we got that good news that Commissioner Thornton and others were wanting to hear on that other grant. But anyway, I'd be happy if this went on consent and the details are in there for us to also learn more about the public engagement part.
I'm agreeable.
Consent?
Yes.
Oh, and Rock and Shoals is included too.
And then Commissioner Davenport had a question as well.
Yeah, no, I was saying consent. I'm really excited, about this. But on page 19 of the attachment 3 from the very done, explains the community engagement and stakeholders with school board and other various entities. And after reading their document, they have done extensive work in other communities and are really engaged with the community and with other stakeholders.
What page was that on?
It's on the attachment number 3, the Berry
Okay.
Dunn. It's page 19.
Attachment 3, though?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Patrick. Commissioner Davenport.
Commissioner Myers?
Yeah, since we're moving this to consent, I just thought I mentioned one other thing which I thought was very positive, and that's the group that we're giving this project to is contracting with a firm, Pond Architecture and Engineering Consultants, and a lot of those people are people who know Athens already because they were getting their master's degrees or undergraduate degrees here, and I like that, that there was already familiarity with our community.
All right. Item 15 is the proposed construction contract change order to JE Dunn to support those elements that were part of that last round of financing that we approved. And so you can see those there, the locker rooms, the acoustical treatment, et cetera. So, Commissioner Wright?
Yeah, I just have a quick question because we've had several Classic Center Arena topics, and the committee that for the bond oversight has yet to meet. Do we have a timeline of when that's going to come together?
So our capital projects director is a staff liaison and setting up a meeting time now.
Okay, excellent. I don't want to hold this up, but every time I read about that in the steps, okay. But I'd be happy if this was on consent, if it's got all the details in it. I didn't see.
It doesn't have pricing though.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's got some to be
Leave that off.
determined. Okay.
But just for you and everybody's benefit that's watching, this isn't new money. This has
Right.
already been approved, and this is just kind of going through and ordering things when they need to get ordered.
But if it goes over the 2 million, then it's going to go over budget, right?
That is what we have available. I think there's still some owner-approved contingency that we can use to try and balance some things if we have to. but that's what we're projecting.
Do we know if that little committee's met yet or not?
Staff is pulling them together now.
I'm sorry.
The little committee.
It's wintertime, it's chilly out there.
It is. Okay, sorry, Allison.
Am I invisible over here?
The Memorial Park Pool Maintenance Contract Award, and of course, the
Put that on consent.
history of this.
It's got to be determined, still in there. Is
Yeah,
that okay?
TBD.
Yeah, so we can't put it on consent if we don't have a responsive bidder yet. But no, I feel you, I would love to if we could. Any questions about that?
No, just got to be yourself.
All right, and we have two items that are title only, the approval of 3 contract attorney positions. Those are obviously contract labor, so temporary, and then the adoption of the transit Title VI plan, which is something they have to do recurrently as a recipient of federal dollars. So I'd entertain a motion to adjourn the agenda-setting session and move into our executive session. All right, I've got a motion from Commissioner Wright and a second from Commissioner Davenport. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, any opposed? All right, we'll go ahead and move to executive session. Members of the public, thank you for joining us tonight. I hope you have a beautiful evening. Stay warm out there.